The clock on the mantelpiece struck 11, and Marisol Penrith felt each chime land like a stone dropped into still water. The solicitor's office smelled of old paper and pipe smoke. Rain pressed against the tall window in steady sheets, blurring Bloomsbury into a smear of gray and gas lamp gold. Marisol pressed her gloved hands together in her lap to keep them from trembling. Her godfather. Her protector. The closest thing she had to a father since her own had died at sea when she was 9. Hadrian Vexley, Duke of Brookshaven, was 3 weeks in the ground. And Marisol Penrith, 22 years old, daughter of a Navy lieutenant, ward of Charity, was about to learn what he had left her. "Miss Penrith," said the solicitor, a gray-whiskered man named Mr. Talvert, peering at her over half-moon spectacles. "I must ask you to listen very carefully. The terms of His Grace's final will are unusual." Across the room, near the heavy oak doors, a man stood with his back to her. He had arrived 2 minutes before her, shed a black greatcoat dusted with rain, and taken up a position by the window without acknowledging her. Tall, broad through the shoulders, in a way that suggested labor rather than leisure. Dark hair cut shorter than fashion preferred. He had not turned, but Marisol had felt the awareness of him the way one feels the edge of a blade in the dark. She knew, without being told, that he was a Vexley. "Unusual how, sir?" she asked. Mr. Talvert cleared his throat. He drew a sealed envelope from a folio and set it on the desk between them. The wax seal bore the Brookshaven crest, a hawk over a sheaf of wheat. The bulk of the estate, title, entailed lands, London House, Northumberland Holdings, passes by law to His Grace's only surviving male relative, his nephew, Mr. Cassian Vexley, formerly Captain Vexley of the 42nd Foot. So, the Duke, then. The one Hadrian had spoken of only twice in 5 years, and never warmly. "However, Mr. Talvert said, and the word landed like a struck bell. His Grace, in the last week of his life, executed an additional codicil. It concerns you, Miss Penrith, and it concerns Mr. Vexley. It must be read aloud, in the presence of you both, before either of you may know its contents." She could not feel her hands. "Read it, then," said the man at the window. His voice was low, rough at the edges, the voice of a man who had spent years giving orders, in places far from drawing rooms. He still did not turn. Mr. Talvert broke the seal. "To my beloved godchild, Marisol Adelaide Penrith, and to my nephew, Cassian Augustus Vexley, I leave the following provision. It is my wish that within 8 days of the reading of this codicil, the said Marisol Penrith and the said Cassian Vexley shall be joined in lawful matrimony. Should this union be solemnized within the prescribed 8 days, the unentailed property of the Brookshaven estate, the dower house at Wrenmere, the income from the Yorkshire mills, my private collection, and the sum of £40,000, shall pass jointly to husband and wife. Should this union not be solemnized, the said property and sums shall pass in their entirety to the Crown, and Miss Penrith shall receive nothing whatsoever from my estate. This is my will, so be it witnessed." Silence. The clock ticked. The man at the window turned. She had been wrong about the dark hair. It was nearer to black, damp from the rain, curling at his collar. His face was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30, but weathered, sun-darkened, with a faint silver scar that ran from the corner of his left eye down beneath his collar. His eyes were the color of slate before a storm. They were fixed on her, with an expression that had already done the calculation, and arrived at a conclusion she would not like. "Madam," he said. "Sir," she answered. Her voice did not shake. "Were you aware of this provision?" "I was not." "Truly?" "Sir, I sat in this room 20 minutes ago, and did not know my godfather had a nephew living, beyond a name. I came to be told whether I was to keep my lodgings through the winter. He studied her. Mr. Talbot, leave us a moment. Mr. Vexley, I cannot. 5 minutes, Talbot. The girl will not bolt. Will you, Miss Penrith? I find I am not certain my legs will carry me, sir. So no. Something flickered at the corner of his mouth, the ghost of a smile. Mr. Talbot removed himself. Cassian Vexley crossed to the desk, looked down at the codicil, and read it once more in silence. My uncle, he said, had a sense of humor I never appreciated in life, and find I appreciate even less in death. Your Grace, not yet. Cassian will do. That is improper, sir. This entire room is improper, Miss Penrith. We may as well economize on the small things. He turned toward her fully. Allow me to be plain. I returned to England 9 days ago. I have not slept under a Vexley roof in 11 years. I came home because my uncle was dying and asked it of me, and I arrived 3 hours after he stopped breathing. And now I am told that I must marry, in 8 days, a woman I have never seen before this hour, or my uncle's private fortune will go to the crown. Yes, she said. I gather that is the position. You are remarkably composed. I am in shock, sir. Composure is what shock looks like on women who were not raised to weep in solicitors' offices. Tell me, what would you receive in this scheme if we did not marry? Nothing, sir. And before this hour, what did you expect? A small annuity, £40 a year, enough to live as a gentlewoman of reduced means. And if there is no annuity in the will itself? Then I have a trunk of clothes, a locket of my mother's, £14 in the 3%, and no living relation in England, closer than a great-aunt in Penzance who has never written to me. He was silent. I do not want your fortune, sir. I want my £40 a year. I want my own door to lock at night. I have wanted these things since I was 9 years old. And yet, here we are. Here we are. Cassian Vexley walked to the window and back. He moved like a man accustomed to small spaces. A ship's deck, a soldier's tent. Miss Penrith, I do not want to marry. I came to England to bury my uncle, settle the estate, and return to a commission I have been promised in Upper Canada. Then refuse the codicil, sir, and let the crown have the 40,000. It is no concern of mine. Is it not? It is not. I shall manage on £14 and a great-aunt who does not write. I shall manage, sir. He looked at her for a long moment. Mr. Talbot, you may return. The door opened at once. Mr. Vexley, Miss Penrith, I beg you, before any rash— There is to be no rashness, Cassian said. Miss Penrith and I require lodgings and counsel for the next 8 days. She cannot remain alone in lodgings while this matter is unresolved. Half of London will know of this codicil by Tuesday. He turned back to Marisol. Miss Penrith, you will come today to the Brookshaven house in Cavendish Square. My uncle's sister, Lady Iphigenia Vexley, will serve as chaperone. You will be presented as my uncle's goddaughter. During the 8 days, we will determine whether any course exists by which neither of us must surrender what we cannot afford to lose. If no such course exists, we will part, and you will leave the house with my personal pledge of £100 a year for life. You have my word as a soldier. She stared at him. Why would you offer me that? Because my uncle was many things, but he was not cruel, and he did not place your name in this document to ruin you. He meant to protect you. I owe him better than to let you walk out into the rain on £14, because his solution did not suit my plans. That is decent of you, sir. It is the bare minimum a gentleman owes a woman his family has placed in an impossible position. The door opened again without a knock. A woman swept in. tall, dressed in deep mourning silk, perhaps 55, with an iron-gray coil of hair and the kind of face that had once been beautiful and was now formidable. Her eyes, the same slate as Cassian's, took in the room in a single sweeping glance. "So," said Lady Iphigenia vexedly, "it is true. Aunt, I had not expected you." "No, my dear. Mr. Talvert's clerk is a great-nephew of my late housekeeper, and I pay him 5 shillings a quarter to remember it. 8 days, is it?" "8 days, ma'am." "And the sum?" 40,000. The dower house, the mills, the collection. Lady Iphigenia's gaze swung to Marisol. "Stand up, child." Marisol stood. The older woman crossed to her, took her chin between 2 black-gloved fingers, and tilted her face to the gray light. "Penrith. Lieutenant Penrith's girl. The one Hadrian collected from the school in Bath when the Navy Widows Fund failed." "Yes, ma'am." "He spoke of you. He was kind to no one in general. You must have been an exception." She turned to her nephew. "Cassian, get her cloak. The carriage is at the door. She comes with me. Now. Mr. Talvert, I shall expect a copy of the codicil at Cavendish Square by 4 o'clock, and your discretion until the parish bells ring on Judgment Day." "Lady Iphigenia, I assure you, excellent." "Cassian." "The cloak." He moved. Marisol watched him cross the room. This man who had been a stranger 10 minutes ago, and was now, by the writing of a dead man, the axis on which the rest of her life would turn, and felt the first cold splinter of something far more dangerous than fear. She felt curious. She felt seen. He held out her cloak, and as she turned for him to settle it on her shoulders, his fingers brushed the bare skin at the nape of her neck, accidentally, briefly, and Marisol Penrith, who had not been touched by a man in any tender way since her father lifted her down from a carriage at the age of 9, felt the splinter drive deeper. 8 days, she thought. The rain hammered the windows. Lady Iphigenia was already at the door. The carriage smelled of beeswax and wet wool, and the faint trace of a man's tobacco. Hadrian's, Marisol realized, and felt her throat close. Lady Iphigenia took the forward seat. Cassian swung in opposite his aunt, with the unconscious neatness of a man boarding a ship. The carriage lurched forward into the rain. "Now," said the older woman. "Cassian, speak." "Ma'am, I have not yet decided." "You have decided to bring her to my house, which means you have decided not to refuse outright. So speak." "My intent is to find a course that requires neither marriage nor forfeiture. You did not know him as I did. Hadrian did not leave doors ajar. Why 8 days, do you think? Why her?" Lady Iphigenia's gaze cut sideways to Marisol. "He had 3 goddaughters. Why this one?" "I do not know, ma'am," Marisol said before she could stop herself. "Did I ask you, child?" "No, ma'am, I beg your pardon." "Do not beg my pardon. I dislike begging. Did he speak to you in the last weeks?" Marisol's hands tightened on her reticule. "He sent for me twice. The first time he gave me a string of pearls that had belonged to his mother, and told me he had. He used the words attended to it. The second time was 8 days before he died. He held my hand. He said, 'I'm sorry, child. I have done a hard thing. Forgive me when you understand it.' Cassian had gone very still. Did he name me? He did not, sir. I had no notion you were even in England. And the pearls? In my trunk. I have not worn them. I did not feel they were mine yet." Lady Iphigenia made a small, sharp sound. "Oh, Hadrian, you old serpent. He picked her, Cassian, on purpose. He did not pick a fortune hunter. He picked a girl with 14 pounds in the funds, who, when offered the entire codicil to her advantage, said, 'I want my 40 pounds a year.' Ma'am, Be quiet, child. I am paying you a compliment." The carriage swung around a corner. "There remains the question," Cassian said, "of why." "Why what, dear?" Why, he wished it. Uncle did not throw 40,000 pounds at a problem to be sentimental. No, he did not. There is a great deal you are not seeing, my boy. Cavendish Square first. Tea. Dry clothes for the child. And then I shall tell you what your uncle was doing in the last 6 months of his life. You will neither of you like it. Ma'am, Marisol said, am I to understand that you intend me to remain in your house? You are to understand, child, that you are already in my carriage, and I do not collect young women in my carriages and then put them out into the rain. Yes, you will remain. You will be presented as a goddaughter, brought under family protection. You will be given a maid, a wardrobe befitting the connection, and a measure of my time, which is more than I give most of my own blood. In return, you will conduct yourself with discretion. Ma'am, I cannot accept a wardrobe. You can, and you will. We shall consider the matter closed. The carriage slowed. One last thing, Lady Iphigenia said. Cassian. There is a young lady, recently arrived in town, whom your uncle, in the last fortnight of his life, half promised would be presented to you. Lady Persephone Halloway, the Earl of Marchwood's only daughter. The mother is calling at 4. Your uncle did not write that promise into any document, but he wrote it into half a dozen letters, and the mother holds the letters. Aunt, I'm only telling you what you will face this afternoon. Miss Penrith will be upstairs being measured by a modiste. Cassian's eyes flicked to Marisol's face. Very well. The footman opened the carriage door. Lady Iphigenia descended first. Cassian stepped down second and turned, holding up his hand to Marisol. She placed her gloved fingers in his. He did not let go at once when her feet touched the wet flagstones. For half a second longer than necessary, his hand closed around hers. 8 days, Miss Penrith. 8 days, Mr. Vexley. Cassian. That is still improper, sir. Yes. I find I do not care. He released her hand. Inside, in the marble hush of the entrance hall, a side door opened, and a woman in pale blue stepped through, drawing off her gloves. She was perhaps 20. Honey-colored hair. A face that had been told it was lovely since the cradle and believed it. Her eyes went first to Cassian, with a sweep of frank assessment, and then, slowly, to Marisol. The assessment changed. Aunt Iphigenia, darling, the young woman said, in a voice like sugared cream. I am dreadfully early. Will you not present me? Lady Iphigenia, halfway up the staircase, turned with an expression of contained rage. Lady Persephone, I had not expected you for another hour. No, said Lady Persephone, smiling with every tooth. I imagine you had not. The drawing room was done in pale green silk, with portraits of dead Vexleys watching from the long wall like a panel of reluctant judges. Lady Persephone Halloway, Lady Iphigenia said, with a courtesy so exact it could have cut glass. May I present Miss Marisol Penrith? Miss Penrith was the late Duke's goddaughter, and is, for the period of mourning, under our protection. Marisol curtsied. Lady Persephone inclined her head perhaps half an inch. Goddaughter, Lady Persephone said, as one might say, cabbage. How very moving. I do not believe His Grace ever mentioned. Hadrian rarely mentioned his charities, my dear. He preferred them quiet. The word charities hung in the air like a small knife thrown and caught. And Mr. Vexley, Lady Persephone said, sweeping her smile up to its full radiance. How very glad I am to meet you at last. Your dear uncle wrote so warmly of you. I feel I know you already. I am at her ladyship's service, Cassian said. It was the most perfect non-answer Marisol had ever heard a man make. Lady Persephone was reading him for warmth and finding none. I had hoped that we might prevail upon you to dine. Tomorrow, perhaps. Quite small. Suitable for morning. Tomorrow, I am engaged. Are you, sir? I am. The Countess of Marchwood entered then, in a shower of apologies for the rain. Lady Iphigenia, with the air of a general reorganizing her lines under fire, contrived to seat Lady Persephone at an angle that did not allow her to face Cassian directly. Marisol was gestured to a chair near the window. For a quarter of an hour, she watched Lady Persephone work. The girl was very good. She drew Cassian out about Upper Canada, about his regiment, and Cassian, courteous, answered in monosyllables that did not invite extension. The blow, when it came, was beautifully wrapped. Miss Penrith, Lady Persephone said sweetly, you must tell me, for I am dying of curiosity. How did you come to be His Grace's goddaughter? My father served under His Grace's brother, in the Mediterranean. Lieutenant Edmund Penrith. He died at sea when I was 9, ma'am, and His Grace stood for me at my confirmation when I was 12. How affecting. And your education? You speak so prettily. One would never. Lady Persephone caught herself, eyes wide, all innocence. One would never guess. It was the smallest knife Lady Persephone could find in her reticule. Marisol breathed once. His Grace saw to my education, ma'am. I was 4 years at Mrs. Halversham's school in Bath, and 3 years thereafter as companion to Mrs. Halversham herself, in payment of the school fees His Grace had advanced. I am told that when I am quiet, I pass for a lady. When I speak, the secret comes out. There was a small silence. Then Cassian Vexley laughed. It was almost soundless. It cracked the room open like a thrown stone through ice. Forgive me, he said, instantly composed. Miss Penrith, that was admirably said. Mr. Vexley, said the Countess of Marchwood faintly. Madame, I beg your pardon. I have been on campaign too long. Lady Persephone, please accept my apology on Miss Penrith's behalf. She has had a hard morning. Her godfather's will was read to her not 3 hours ago, and the news in it was considerable. Considerable, Lady Persephone echoed. Considerable. We shall not trouble you with the particulars. Lady Persephone Halloway, who had walked into the drawing room 25 minutes earlier, with the unassailable confidence of a girl whose mother held 6 letters from the late Duke, looked across the green silk room and saw that something had changed in this house in the last 48 hours. She set down her teacup with a click. Of course. Mama, we are imposing. In the rustle of the departure, Lady Persephone, passing Marisol's chair, paused. She bent, as if to adjust her shawl, and her voice was so low, only Marisol could hear it. Whatever it is you think you have, I will know what it is by Friday, and then we shall speak again. She straightened, smiled brilliantly, and was gone. The door closed. Lady Iphigenia did not move for the count of 3 full breaths. Then she crossed to the window and said, without turning, Cassian, ring for fresh tea. We have rather less than 8 days now. We have, I should think, 4. Why 4? Because that girl will have her mother in front of every dowager in London by Wednesday, and the Morning Post's gossip column on Friday, and on Saturday morning, Hadrian's solicitors' clerks will be offered £5 apiece for the contents of the codicil, and at least one of them will take it. By Sunday, this will be in the papers. She turned, and Marisol saw, for the first time, the steel beneath the morning silk. So, children, tea. And then I shall tell you what your uncle was doing in the last 6 months of his life. 4 days. The rain had not stopped. The fresh tea came and went cold in its pot. Lady Iphigenia unlocked a lower drawer of the writing desk with a key on a chatelaine at her waist and drew out a slim Morocco-bound folder. Cassian, what did your uncle write to you in the last year? 3 letters. The first concerned the death of his foreman at the Yorkshire mills. The second contained an enquiry as to my health. The third was the summons home. He did not write to you of a man called Mordaunt Crail? No. Of £60,000 advanced to Crail out of the Brookshaven private fortune in the spring of last year? Of the disappearance of Crail, the same sum, and a quantity of the late Duke's private correspondence in the last week of October? Cassian had gone very still. Aunt, tell me, plainly, what my uncle did. He was robbed by a man he trusted, of a great deal of money, and of certain letters which, if produced, would do considerable harm to this family. He spent the last 6 months of his life attempting to recover both. He did not succeed. The codicil is what he wrote, when he understood he would not live to settle the matter himself. Marisol set down her teacup. Ma'am, forgive me. I do not understand what this has to do with me. You will. Listen. Crail, who served Hadrian as private secretary for 11 years, diverted £60,000 through accounts at 4 banks. By the time my brother's man of business discovered it, Crail had been gone 3 days. Why did he not pursue him publicly? Cassian asked. Because Crail took the letters. What letters? Lady Iphigenia's hands tightened on the folder. Cassian. Your uncle, in 1812, made certain investments of his private fortune in support of a venture that would now be considered very inconvenient indeed for an English duke to have supported. The crown would consider it inconvenient. The letters Crail took include 3 written in Hadrian's own hand, and 1 written in yours. In mine. Written when you were 20, in support of a position your uncle held. I do not even remember writing such a letter. You will when you read it. I have a copy, in my own hand, made before Crail took the original. Cassian closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they had gone the color of slate at sea, and the codicil. Hadrian believed Crail did not take the letters to sell to the crown. Crail took them to sell to you, to the new Duke of Brookshaven, at a price that would beggar 1/3 of the unentailed estate. So Hadrian set a different trap. He locked £40,000 behind a marriage to a girl with no powerful family, no political connections, and a character he had spent 5 years observing in person. A girl who would have, by virtue of her marriage, a legal interest in the recovery of those letters. He gave you 8 days because he believed Crail would surface within the month. He wanted you not alone when Crail came. He wanted me married to a witness. He wanted you married to an ally, with nothing to gain from your fall. Cassian turned, slowly, and looked at Marisol. She had stopped breathing some moments ago, and only now remembered to begin again. Miss Penrith knew nothing of this. Hadrian was very particular on that point. He told me himself in November. The girl must come to it clean, or she will not come to it at all. Ma'am, Marisol said, I am a Navy lieutenant's daughter. I have no skill in such matters. Child, look at me. Lady Iphigenia's eyes held Marisol's across the carpet, with a steadiness that was almost kindness. Hadrian did not require a politician. He required a person who, when offered a great deal of money in exchange for one small lie, would refuse. He believed you were that person. Are you? Marisol thought of Hadrian's hand on hers at the bedside. Yes, ma'am. Then sit a moment in that knowledge. Cassian had crossed to the window, and Marisol understood that he was a man rearranging his life in his head. It was not the codicil that bound him. It was the letter in his own hand. Aunt, does Lady Persephone know any of this? She does not. The letters were taken 19 weeks ago. If Marchwood had a copy, we would have heard from Marchwood by Christmas. Persephone is hunting you because her mother has 6 fond letters and a daughter on the shelf. Nothing more. Then we have, at present, 2 threats. Crail, who knows everything, and Persephone, who knows nothing and is determined to find out something, and on Sunday, a 3rd. The newspapers. Yes. Cassian turned and looked at Marisol. Miss Penrith, I owe you an apology. I told you my uncle had not put your name in his will to ruin you. I believed it. But I told you also that he meant only to protect you, and that was not the whole truth. He meant to protect you, and he meant to use you. I am not certain I have the right to ask you to consent to having been used. Sir, you cannot apologize for a thing you did not do. I can apologize for a thing my family did. Then I accept the apology, and I would ask, in return, that you stop apologizing and tell me what you intend to do. He looked at her for a long beat. I intend to find Crail, to recover the letters. I intend, if Crail surfaces during the 8 days, to have you legally and publicly married to me before he does, because the value of the letters falls considerably the moment your name is on the marriage register. I intend, if Crail does not surface, to marry you anyway. I intend to provide you, in the marriage settlements, with a separate establishment, an independent income, and a clause permitting separation by mutual agreement after 2 years. I intend to leave for Upper Canada, as I had originally planned, and to leave you the dower house at Renmere. I intend to be your husband on paper, for as long as you need a husband on paper, and no longer. Marisol heard him out without moving. Mr. Vexley, I should like to make 3 observations. The first is that you have, in 2 minutes, decided the entire course of my life on my behalf, and you have not once asked me whether I consent to it. The second is that I am not a piece of property to be assigned a separate establishment and a clause. If I marry you, I marry you. I have seen a paper marriage, and I would not give the worst woman of my acquaintance to such an arrangement. The third is that I will help you find this man, Crail. Not because you have asked me, but because Hadrian asked me, in the only way left to him. The room was very quiet. Miss Penrith, are you proposing to me, madam? I am proposing to think about it, sir, with considerably more information than I had an hour ago, and I am proposing that you cease to dispose of my person as if I were a regiment to be billeted. Are we agreed? We are agreed. Lady Iphigenia rose. Cassian, send Beckett to find Mr. Talbot. Marisol, Mrs. Tyndall is upstairs. You will sleep before dinner. We resume at 8. At the drawing-room door, Marisol paused. Mrs. Tyndall, the housekeeper, was already there. Marisol turned in the doorway and looked back at the dead Duke's portrait, at the opened folder, at Cassian Vexley with his head bowed. He looked up as if he had felt her. For a half-second, across the length of the room, his eyes met hers, and Marisol saw, quite plainly, as one sees the shape of a coastline through a parted fog, that he was afraid. Not of Crail, not of the letters, of her, of what it would cost him if she stayed. She turned away and followed Mrs. Tyndall up the staircase. She woke in the dark, in a strange bed, to a soft, persistent knocking at the door. The mantel clock read 9:15. She had not meant to sleep. Miss Penrith, Lady Iphigenia begs you will come down. She rose, dressed in a borrowed wrapper of gray wool, and twisted her hair into a knot at her nape. The small library was on the first floor. Lady Iphigenia sat in one of 2 leather chairs, in a dressing gown of plum silk. Cassian was nowhere in sight. Sit, child. My nephew is downstairs going through 3 locked dispatch boxes. I sent for you because I would prefer to have a quarter of an hour with you before he reappears. Will you take a glass of Madeira? Thank you, ma'am, Lady Iphigenia poured. You said this afternoon you would not enter a paper marriage. Did you mean it? Yes, ma'am. Why? Because if I marry your nephew, I shall be his wife. Not on a paper, but in a church, before a clergyman, and before God. The form of words does not change because we have made an arrangement to mean it less. And, even if I were to consent in principle, I should be in the position of the woman in the household where I served. Mrs. Halversham, her husband had married her for her dowry, and they had agreed they would live as cousins. She was 60 when I lived with her. She had been emptied out by being civil to a man for 38 years. I should rather have my £100 a year and be alone than be Mrs. Halversham. And if my nephew were to offer you something other than that? Ma'am, your nephew has known me for 10 hours. As have I, child, and I am asking you the question. Marisol set the glass down. I do not know him. I do not know whether I could love him. I know he is a man who returned home for a dying uncle and arrived 3 hours late and grieves it. I know he has chosen, between this hour and 4 o'clock this afternoon, to give up the rest of his life, rather than let his uncle's family be broken by a scoundrel. I know he laughed once today at something I said, and the laugh was real. These are not nothing. These are not enough. They are not nothing. They are not enough. And yet there is the codicil, there is Crail, there is Persephone. What I am asking you, child, is this. If, in 4 days, my nephew comes to you and says, I cannot give you what you deserve, but I can give you my word that I will not make of you a Mrs. Halversham. I can give you my company at table, my conversation in the evenings, my hand to walk into rooms on, and an honest attempt at a marriage that is more than a paper. What will you say? Marisol thought of the slate eyes meeting hers across the drawing room. She thought of the half-second he had held her hand at the carriage door. She thought of his low, rough Cassian will-do, and I find I do not care. I will say yes, ma'am, if he means it. Good. And may I ask why you want him to mean it? Lady Iphigenia looked into the fire. When she spoke, her voice had altered. My elder sister married a man she did not love at 19, because the family required the alliance. She was civil to him for 41 years. She died in 1818, and on the day she died, she said to me, Iffy, I have not had a single hour of joy in this house since I came into it. Do not let any other girl do it. My nephew is a man who, if permitted, will make of his marriage an exact copy of his uncle's and his father's and my sister's. Civil, distant, honorable, empty. He will do it not from cruelty, but from terror, because he has been afraid of his own heart since he was 16, and he believes that if he loves a thing, he will lose it. The list is not short. His mother, his father, a brother lost at sea. My brother Hadrian. I should very much like, before I die, to see him make a marriage that is not the next entry on that list. You are not obliged to save my nephew. I will not think less of you if, in 4 days, you take your £100 and walk out. But if you stand up in that church and mean it, I want you to know what you are walking into. He's not an easy man. He will not be an easy husband. He will be worth it if you are willing to be patient enough that he does not flinch at being loved. Yes, ma'am. Drink your wine. To bed. In the corridor she paused, at the head of the stairs, because she could see, at the far end, beneath the door of Cassian's sitting room, a thin yellow line of candlelight. She did not knock. She turned the other way, and the door at the far end opened, and he was standing in it. He was in shirt sleeves. He had a book in his hand. He had clearly come out for nothing more than a glass of water. He stopped. She stopped. Miss Penrith, he said very quietly. Mr. Vexley, are you well? I am well, sir. Your aunt sent for me. Yes. He hesitated. In the morning, I will have something to tell you both. But I would ask you tonight, only one question. What my aunt has been telling you in the small library this evening, was it kindly told? It was kindly told, sir. And true, I think. He drew a breath. It was a breath of relief. Thank you. Good night, Mr. Vexley. Good night, Miss Penrith. She went into the green room and lay down in the dark and thought. He came out to the landing for a glass of water and a book he was not reading, in a house of 7 floors with 23 servants, and I think he came out because he could not sleep until he knew I was still here. She slept. By 8 o'clock, a parcel had arrived from the modiste. A single morning gown, soft dove gray, with black ribbon at the cuffs, as a concession to mourning. At 9, breakfast with Lady Iphigenia. Cassian had risen at 6 and ridden out at 7. Mr. Hollis, an inquiry agent, had departed for Bristol on the 8 o'clock coach. Smile a little, but not too much. You have 3 sentences. They are, my father served under the late Duke's brother in the Mediterranean and died at sea. I was 4 years at Mrs. Halversham's school in Bath. His Grace was very kind to me. Anything more is a hostage to fortune. Yes, ma'am. The callers came. Mrs. Bellinger, plump and warmly disposed, and Lady Cordelia Strain, sharper, watching everything. Marisol said her 3 sentences, sat down, and folded her hands. Lady Cordelia's teaspoon rattled, very faintly, against the saucer. When they had gone, Lady Iphigenia said, "Well done. Strain will repeat every word in 3 drawing rooms before tea. We are walking in the square." They walked. The rain of the previous day had cleared into a thin, pale February sun. Lady Iphigenia returned the salutes of passing gentlemen with the briefest of inclinations, naming each man under her breath as he passed. Banker, fool, decent, drunkard, dangerous, decent fool, until Marisol found herself biting her cheek not to smile. Ah, here he comes. Cassian had ridden into the square. He swung down at the curb and crossed to them. Aunt, Miss Penrith, Wapping, the dock, and then the offices of the Bristol packet. Productive? Suggestive. Walk with us. Once round, slowly. Miss Penrith, take his other arm. Marisol obeyed before she had time to think. She placed her gloved hand on the inside of Cassian's elbow, and she felt, through the wool of his coat, through her own glove, the warmth of him. He looked down at her. Good morning. Good morning. You slept? A little. To anyone watching from a window of the square, they were a perfectly proper trio. Inside her glove, Marisol's hand sat very still on Cassian's arm, and his arm sat very still under her hand, and she could feel the small, careful negotiation of 2 people who did not, particularly, want to let go. Sir, she said softly, last night you came out to the landing for a glass of water. You were not really come out for a glass of water. A pause. No, Miss Penrith, I was not. I thought not. Are you angry? No, sir. Pleased? That is a forward question, Mr. Vexley. Yes, forgive me. I am not displeased. I do not yet know more than that. I thought you should be told. Thank you. Lady Iphigenia, on his other arm, was conducting a perfectly audible monologue about the ironwork of the railings, with the rigorous attention of a woman who had not heard a single word her 2 charges were saying. Luncheon was the truth. They ate in the small library, with the door locked. Cassian drew a folded sheet from his coat. Mordaunt Crail did not take ship for the West Indies. He has been living, under the name Mr. Craddock, in 2 rooms above a chandler's, in a court off Wapping High Street. I have spoken to a man who has seen him. Crail is alive, in London, and is behaving in the manner of a man waiting for a particular event, before he moves. The funeral, Lady Iphigenia said. The funeral is past. The reading of the will is past. The next event of consequence is the marriage, or the failure of it. Marisol set down her spoon. Sir, there is a thing you have not said. Crail does not know me. He cannot calculate whether I am a witness with an interest. Married, I become a legal obstacle. But unmarried, you are a person with no legal interest, in possession of certain information that he would prefer not to be in possession of, living in a house from which he would prefer you were not living. Cassian, Aunt, she has worked it out. If Crail calculates as I would in his place, he will not in the next 4 days seek to harm Miss Penrith. He will seek to intimidate her. He has not, in 11 years, ever harmed a person physically. He is a thief and a coward. But cowards in corners can be made to act unpredictably. We have, perhaps, 4 days in which Crail is still calculating. After that, we are in a different country. What do you propose? Miss Penrith does not leave this house unaccompanied. All callers received in your company. And on Friday evening, 3 days from today, Miss Penrith and I sit down, alone, in this room, and decide together what is to be done about the marriage. 3 days early, while there is still time to choose otherwise, without ruin to her. Friday evening. Miss Penrith, are you content? I'm content with not leaving the house unattended. I'm content with Friday evening. I should add only one thing. If, on Friday evening, you and I decide we shall not marry, I shall still help you find Crail. I shall not walk out of this house and leave you to it. That decision and the other decision are not the same decision. Understood. Thank you. There was a silence. Lady Iphigenia walked to the window and said with her back to the room, "There is a man in a brown coat across the square, pretending to read a notice on the railings. He has been there for perhaps 12 minutes. He is not from this neighborhood." Cassian was up before she had finished. He crossed to the window and stood beside her, at an angle that did not show him at the glass. 12 minutes. Has he looked up at this house? Twice. Both times when a footman crossed the area. Stay back from the glass, Aunt. Ring for Beckett. Tell him to send Tom out by the kitchen door round to the next street, to walk past the man once, slowly, and to come back to me with a description of his face. At once, she rang. Cassian crossed back to the table. He stood at Marisol's shoulder, one hand resting lightly on the back of her chair. Miss Penrith, it is possible that I have miscalculated. It is possible the 4 days are already 3. Will you forgive me? For what, sir? For the fact that you have been in this house 28 hours, and it is already not safe. She placed her hand very deliberately over his where it rested on the back of her chair. She felt his fingers turn beneath hers and close around her own. Once, briefly, hard, and then release, because Beckett's footsteps were already coming up the stairs. The clock struck the half-hour past 1. 6.5 days remained. Tom came back at 2:15, a slim, red-haired youth, scrubbed pink with the cold. He's about 40, sir, square in the face, brown hair going gray at the temples. He's not a gentleman. His coat is good, but it's been brushed too often at the cuffs. He kept his right hand in his pocket the whole time I was near him. Did he look at you? Once, sir. Then he looked away. He did not turn his head, only his eyes. Tom, you have done well. You will not speak of this in the kitchen. No, ma'am. When the door closed, Cassian crossed to the window again. He is gone. He has what he came for. He will be replaced. That was not Crail. Crail is 52 and walks with a stoop. That was a man Crail has paid. How many such men do you suppose Crail commands? 2, perhaps 3. He has not the resources for many. Then by tomorrow night, he will have used half his resources merely to watch this house. By Friday, he will be running thin. Cassian turned from the window. Miss Penrith, you have not asked me what is in the letter. No, sir. When you wish me to know, you will tell me. Mrs. Halversham used to say that a woman who asked questions she did not need, answered would, in the fullness of time, be told things she did not wish to know. That is admirably economical. What did the letter say, Cassian? Lady Iphigenia said. She has earned the courtesy of not having to ask. It was written in 1812. Uncle had advanced money to a man, ostensibly a merchant in Hamburg. The advance was payment passed through the merchant to certain persons in Paris, in support of a faction that, had it succeeded, would have shortened the war. It was not treason against England, but it would, if produced now, be represented as private dealing with foreign nationals during wartime, and it would be ruinous. I had been given a draft to copy in a fair hand from my uncle's signature. I had no notion what the letter was. I copied it. I added my initials at the foot, a habit I had at 20. Anyone examining it would conclude that I had drafted the letter on my uncle's behalf, knowing its purpose. I cannot prove that I did not. And Crail has the original, and by my source's report this morning, Crail has been seen drinking in a public house off Lombard Street with a man known to be in the regular employ of a particular newspaper proprietor. He is sounding the market. He is finding out what the price would be. Then we have less time than I thought. I think on Saturday, when the codicil reaches the papers, Crail will calculate that the moment to introduce a different Brookshaven scandal is precisely upon him. And on Sunday morning, the letter is in the Morning Post, and I am ruined twice in 12 hours. Marisol drew a breath. Mr. Vexley, I think we should go to Friday evening with our heads clear. I think your aunt and I should be visible in a controlled way, in some place where we can be seen by people whose seeing us will help. Tomorrow. My dear girl, the car warden concert tomorrow night. Small, musical, entirely respectable. The Countess of Marchwood will be there with her daughter. London will see Miss Penrith on your arm. Crail's man will count the minutes. And I shall arrange for the carriage to be the Brookshaven carriage, with the hawk and wheat unmistakable on the door. You wish to make a parade. I wish to make a statement, dear. The difference between we are afraid and we are not. It is a good thought. Miss Penrith? I have nothing to wear to a concert tomorrow, sir. You will, by 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. The modiste owes me a favor. Then yes, sir. Tomorrow. The afternoon passed. A different man, in a dark blue coat, took up a position on the south side of the square, and stood there until dusk, after which he was replaced by a third, in a plain black greatcoat. That night Marisol slept badly. In the morning, the modiste came at 10. By 1, Marisol had a concert dress, dark gray, almost black in some lights, with silver gray trim and a high black ribbon at the throat, a dress unmistakably of mourning, and yet cut so that no woman in any room in London would think the wearer had been dressed apologetically. By 7, Lady Iphigenia, in deep mourning silk and the Brookshaven diamonds, had inspected Marisol in the hall and pronounced her adequate. Child. More than adequate. At 7:25, Cassian had come down the stairs in black evening dress, and had stopped, on the third step from the bottom, for half a second longer than was strictly necessary. He had said nothing. He had only inclined his head very slightly and offered her his arm. The 4 blacks were beautiful. Lady Iphigenia, opposite, settled her gloves. Right. Let us go and be looked at. The car warden house in Hanover Square was lit from the basement to the attics. Marisol heard her name spoken in the hall before she had reached the head of the stairs. That is Penrith, the goddaughter. And she felt Cassian's arm tighten the merest fraction beneath her hand. She walked into the long, pale music room with her chin level, and she heard, distinctly, the sound of perhaps 200 pairs of eyes turning at once. She did not look at any of them. A quartet began to tune. Half a minute later, Lady Persephone Holloway slid into the seat directly behind Marisol, leaned forward over Marisol's right shoulder, and said into her ear, "My dear Miss Penrith, what an extraordinary dress. One would almost think you had been measured for it, before His Grace was even cold." The quartet drew their bows. The music began. Marisol turned her head perhaps 2 inches. "His Grace was very kind to me, Lady Persephone. He's being kind to me still." She turned forward again. Beside her, Cassian had not moved, but his hand, at the very edge of her sleeve, opened slightly, and 3 fingers came to rest, for the duration of perhaps 8 bars of music, on the bare skin of her wrist above the line of her glove. It said, "I heard. I am here. Hold your line." She held her line. The first piece ended. In the small interval, a stout man in a green coat detached himself from a knot of company by the door and bent over Lady Iphigenia's hand. "My dear lady." A word, perhaps, in the next interval. No, the music is about to begin again. I shall return." He inclined his head to Cassian, glanced past him to Marisol, and threaded back the way he had come. "Aunt," Cassian said. That was Sir Joseph Bewley, who is one of the senior undersecretaries at the Home Office, and who never disturbs anybody on a Wednesday evening unless somebody at the Home Office has a question that cannot wait until Friday. "Aunt." "Yes, dear. We have been seen, and the remarking has reached an office in Whitehall, which is rather faster than I had calculated." The music played. Marisol thought, 5 days remain. Crail has sounded a newspaper. Whitehall has noticed us. Lady Persephone has made her opening attack. There is a man in a blue coat outside who has counted our minutes. And someone in this house has, with 3 fingers on my wrist for 8 bars, told me that I am not alone in any of this. The interval lasted a quarter of an hour. Lady Iphigenia did not rise. She offered Sir Joseph the merest profile. "Sir Joseph, how very good of you to call upon us in our row." "Lady Iphigenia, a delicate matter. 2 minutes only, I beg." "Sir Joseph, I am at a concert. Whatever it is may surely be expressed in this row in a single sentence." "Madam, it is to do with a paper. Long thought to be in the late Duke's hands. Now perhaps not. There has been a representation made, to a person of consequence. The person of consequence wishes to know whether he is being approached or whether he is being baited. By whom? By a man who claims to have means of producing the paper. And what does the person of consequence wish me to say? He wishes to know whether the paper exists." Lady Iphigenia smiled, very faintly. "Sir Joseph, tell the person of consequence that the paper has not been in this family's hands these 4 months, and that we are presently engaged in retrieving it. Tell him that I shall personally call upon his wife on Friday morning at 11, with my nephew, and that my nephew will speak to him directly. Are we understood?" "Madam, I cannot." "Sir Joseph, are we understood?" "Madam, we are understood." "Excellent. Good evening." He bowed and withdrew. "Aunt," Cassian said very low. "Friday morning, Cassian. 11. Lord Lydenford's house in Berkeley Square. He is the person of consequence." "Lydenford, aunt. Lydenford is at the Treasury. Lydenford was the man Crail was seen drinking with by my source, twice last fortnight." Lady Iphigenia turned her head, very slightly. "Was he?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then either Lydenford is the buyer, or Lydenford has been pretending to be the buyer in order to flush Crail. We shall know which on Friday. That changes the calendar." "Yes, dear." "Hush. The musicians are sitting down." The second half passed, as a kind of dream. Marisol heard the music as one hears music in another room. She was aware of the back of the room, where, twice, she saw Beckett, who should not have been in the music room at all, pass by the open doorway and look in. Beckett was at the Carwarden concert, because something at Cavendish Square required him to be at the Carwarden concert. At the end of the final piece, she stood up, and only when they had reached the broader space of the landing did she allow herself to murmur, "Sir, Beckett is here." "I know. I saw him in the second piece." "Why?" "I will know in a moment." He let go of her arm, placed her hand on his aunt's, and crossed the landing. Beckett met him at the top of the staircase. They spoke for 15 seconds. Cassian came back. "Aunt. Miss Penrith. The carriage. Now." "Cassian, what?" "In the carriage, Aunt." The carriage door shut, and the carriage moved off into Brook Street. "Cassian. Crail has been at the house." Marisol's stomach turned over. "At Cavendish Square." "Not in it. At the area gate." He came up to the kitchen door at 8:30 and asked the boot boy whether he might have a word with Mrs. Tyndall on a matter of his old employment. The boot boy refused to call her without first finding Beckett. Beckett came up. Crail had gone. "He came to my house. He came to your kitchen, Aunt, when he knew the family were out. He wanted Mrs. Tyndall. He has shifted his ground. He's testing." "Mrs. Tyndall would never. Of course she would never. He is testing whether Mrs. Tyndall can be made to flinch, whether she can be frightened into letting fall some piece of the household's affairs that he can use elsewhere. He is reduced. He is short of resources." Marisol said, "Sir, what does Crail gain by frightening Mrs. Tyndall, given that by Saturday the entire codicil will be public knowledge anyway?" A silence. It was the first time he had called her by her Christian name in the carriage. He did not appear to have noticed. "He gains nothing by Saturday. He gains something only if he has decided to act before Saturday." "He has decided," Lady Iphigenia said, "that he cannot wait for Sunday. He is going to bring his letter forward." "To whom?" "To Lidenford. Tomorrow, perhaps. Friday morning at the latest." "Then we go to Lidenford tomorrow morning, not Friday. At what hour can I call on him?" 9. 9 then. The carriage clattered into Cavendish Square. Beckett was already on the step. In the bright candle-lit hall, Lady Iphigenia stopped in the center of the marble floor and said in a voice that carried up the well of the staircase, "Mrs. Tyndall, the morning room in 5 minutes. Cassian, the study. Marisol, with me." In the small library, Lady Iphigenia said, "Marisol, tomorrow morning Cassian will go to Lord Lidenford. We shall be away from 8:45 until perhaps 11. You will be in this room with the door locked. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "There is one more thing. He called you by your Christian name in the carriage this evening, without realizing he had done it. You permitted it." "Yes, ma'am." "Marisol, Friday evening is 2 days from now. I want you to understand, before you sit down with him on Friday evening, that whatever you decide, the man with whom you will be sitting down has already decided what he wishes. He decided it tonight, in the second piece, when he laid 3 fingers on your wrist for 8 bars. He may not yet know that he has decided. So when you sit down with him on Friday evening, you will not be persuading him of anything. You will only be telling him whether you also have decided." "Ma'am, that is all I have to say, child. Go to bed." In the green room, Annis was waiting with warm milk. Annis sat in the chair by the door with mending and a candle. "Annis, where is Mr. Vexley?" "In the study, miss. He told Beckett he would not be to bed before 2. Beckett said to tell you, if you asked, that there is a man at the door of the study from now until morning. Footman. Big man. Tom's older brother. He is sitting in a chair on the landing in the dark with a poker." "Yes. Thank you, Annis. I did want to know." She lay down. The house was perfectly quiet. Thursday morning came thin and gray, with a light frost on the railings. The Blacktown coach was at the door at 20 to 9. Marisol was already in the small library with Annis, the door locked, Mrs. Tyndall in the corridor. She read 3 chapters of The Antiquary, and absorbed perhaps 2 paragraphs. The clock struck 9. Then 1/4 past. Then 1/2 past. At 1/4 to 10 there was a knock. "Miss Penrith, ma'am. There is a person at the front door, a young woman. She gave the name Mrs. Halversham of Bath. Marisol went very still. That is not possible. Mrs. Halversham is 60 and has not left Bath in 12 years. The young woman then said that she was not Mrs. Halversham herself, but had been sent by Mrs. Halversham with a letter. Pass it under, Mrs. Tyndall. A folded paper, sealed in red wax, slid under the door. Marisol knew Mrs. Halversham's hand at once. She broke it. The date at the top was 3 days previous. My very dear Marisol, a man called at the school on Saturday claiming acquaintance with you. He gave the name Mr. Craddock. He was perhaps 50, square in the face, very civil in manner, asking after your direction in London. I told him I had no information beyond the address you gave me. He was not satisfied. I sent him away. If this man approaches you, do not receive him. He is too charming by half, and his eyes, when he is not smiling, do not match the smile. Mr. Cardew will deliver this himself. Your affectionate friend, Mr. Halversham. Marisol's hands had begun to shake. She rose, crossed to the door, and unlocked it. Mrs. Tyndall, bring her up to the morning room. If she should at any moment attempt to step aside or look into any room, you will instantly send her back to the hall. Where is the man with the poker? In the kitchen passage, ma'am. He will be on the back stairs in 3 seconds if I ring the bell pull twice. She received Catherine Cardew at 5 minutes past 10. The young woman was perhaps 24, plainly dressed in a dark blue traveling pelisse, with red eyes from sleeplessness. Miss Penrith. Miss Cardew, sit down. I have read your aunt's letter. Thank you, ma'am. No. My aunt has not, in fact. The young woman hesitated. Her hands were tightly clasped. I am not Mr. Cardew's sister. I am his wife. I beg your pardon for the small deception. I see. My husband was taken ill at Reading. I had nowhere else to go. I had only the address. Mrs. Cardew, you said you had only the address, by which you mean this address, ma'am, Cavendish Square. My aunt sent it in a separate letter. Mrs. Halversham in Bath did not 3 days ago know I was at Cavendish Square. I had not written to her. I have been in this house 36 hours. The young woman's hands tightened. My aunt must have heard, ma'am, by some other. How? How did Mrs. Halversham know on Sunday that I was at Cavendish Square, when on Sunday I myself did not know I would be at Cavendish Square, because the will was not read until Tuesday morning? The young woman went white. She stood up. Sit down, Mrs. Cardew. Ma'am. Sit down. She sat. Annis pulled the bell pull twice. 3 seconds later the door opened, and into the morning room stepped a very large young footman in livery, with a poker held in one hand at his side. The young woman looked at the door. She sat back down. Mrs. Cardew, you will tell me how you came by the address of this house, because the alternative is that I send for a constable. A long silence. Her face crumpled. He paid us, ma'am. My husband. £5. A man came to us on Monday, with a letter in my aunt's hand. Only she had not written it from Bath. She had written it from her sister's house in Wells, where she was visiting because the man had induced her to. Mrs. Halversham is not in Bath. She is in Wells, ma'am. The man took her there a week ago. The man came again and asked her to write the warning. He came himself. He was Craddock. And the address of this house was on the outside, ma'am. He gave my husband the letter sealed, with the address written on the outside in another hand. We knew, ma'am. We are sorry. We have been very hungry. And the man said no harm should come to anyone, only that I should bring the letter and find a way to remain in the house an hour, and tell him, when he met me at 5 at the Crown in Marylebone Lane, what the inside of the house was like, how many servants, where the doors were, whether there was a man on watch. A silence. I am sorry, ma'am. I am very sorry. Marisol felt the cold, clear arrival of a feeling she had not had since the lieutenant came to the kitchen door at Plymouth. The thing fear sharpens into when you have stopped being able to afford it. Mrs. Cardew, you will write down every detail you can remember about the man. You will then remain in this room. Mr. Vexley will then decide what is to be done. I do not at present believe you will be handed to a constable. I do not promise it. Yes, ma'am. Oh, ma'am. Yes. Marisol turned. She crossed to the door. Mrs. Tyndall, send Beckett to me at once. And, in the green guest room in the bottom of my trunk, a black silk pouch. Inside it is a string of pearls. Bring it to me. At once, ma'am. Beckett came up. Beckett, go now to the Crown Public House in Marylebone Lane. Quietly, in plain clothes. Take the man with the poker and one other. Be at the Crown by 4:30. At 5 o'clock, a man will come in, looking for a young woman in a dark blue pelisse. Permit him to sit. Permit him to wait. At 5:30, when he begins to suspect she will not come, follow him out. You will not apprehend him. Follow only. Note where he goes. Return no later than 8 o'clock and report to Mr. Vexley. Perfectly, ma'am. You did very well at the door this morning. Thank you, ma'am. Mrs. Tyndall reappeared with the pouch. Marisol drew out the pearls. The pearls Hadrian had given her. The pearls she had not worn because they had not, until this hour, felt like hers. She fastened them, herself, at the back of her neck. She walked, alone, to the head of the stairs, and stood there, looking down into the marble hall, and she thought, Hadrian, you old serpent, I think I see, now, what you were doing. I think I see why you picked me. Forgive me when you understand it, you said. I think I begin to. She heard, in the street below, the sound of carriage wheels. 11:15. She placed her hand on the polished rail and went down to meet them. She met them at the foot of the stairs. Cassian came in first. He stopped in the center of the marble floor when he saw her, and his face altered. He took in the pearls. He took in the steadiness of her hands. Marisol, sir, there's been a development. In this house? In this house. Lady Iphigenia stepped past her nephew, took Marisol by the hand. The small library. Now, Cassian, lock the door. Marisol told it without ornament. Mrs. Halversham's letter, the seal, the date, the inconsistency of the address, the young woman in the dark blue pelisse, the half-crown in the boot-boy's hand the night before, recast now as a piece in a pattern. The £5, Mrs. Halversham removed to Wells, the rendezvous at the Crown at 5. She told it from the foot of the staircase to Beckett's departure in 4 minutes, without a wasted sentence. When she finished, Cassian's face had gone, somewhere under the brown, a shade paler. You sent Beckett, without consulting me, instructed them not to apprehend, to follow only. Yes, sir. Marisol. That was exactly correct. If we had taken this man in a public house, we would have one of Crail's hirelings and no Crail. By following him, we may have Crail by tonight. You did precisely what should have been done. Thank you, sir. Aunt. Littenford was the bait, not the buyer. He has been allowing Crail to approach, on the Home Office's instruction. He told me this morning that an offer was made to him at his club on Tuesday. The price was £9,000. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, at a coffee house in the Strand. Littenford to bring the money. Crail to bring the letters. Crail stipulated that the letters be examined on the spot, and that, upon authentication, the exchange be made instantly, and that Crail then walk out. Littenford has agreed to all of it in writing. Cassian. Crail has Littenford by the throat, in writing, until 10 o'clock Saturday morning. Littenford has been working for the Home Office on this for 10 weeks, has known of the existence of the letters since November, and has been keeping me unwarned because he did not know whether I would take fright and bolt for Canada. Hadrian knew then. Hadrian and Lydenford have been corresponding privately since November. Marisol said, "Sir, what does it alter?" He looked at her. "You have been proceeding on the calculation that on Saturday morning, Crail would offer the letter to a newspaper. We now know that on Saturday morning, Crail is to deliver it to Lord Lydenford, whom he believes to be a private buyer. The letter, the moment it is in his hands, is recovered, and Crail is taken. Then the danger is not on Saturday morning. It was before Saturday morning. And now there is a further danger, that Crail, learning that this house has caught his messenger, will alter the time or the place, or take fright, or sell elsewhere on Friday. Yes. Then the danger, sir, is in the next 24 hours. The moment Beckett follows Crail's man home tonight, we shall know where Crail is. Then we have a choice. We can take Crail tonight, with Lydenford's authority, as soon as Beckett returns. They will take Crail and the letter, and the matter is ended before midnight. And on Saturday morning, Crail does not appear at the coffee house. The Home Office is satisfied. The letters are recovered. My uncle's name is not exposed. Mine is not exposed. Yours is not exposed. And if we wait, the matter is more public. The arrest is in a newspaper by Sunday, and Crail is far more likely to bolt before Saturday. Then we take him tonight. Yes, Marisol, tonight." Lady Iphigenia said, "Cassian, there is one more thing. If we take him tonight, the codicil is no longer the urgent matter. The threat to your name is removed. The marriage is no longer required by Saturday. It is no longer required at all." A silence. "Yes, Aunt. It might be considered, Cassian, a kindness to Marisol, given what you have asked her to endure, to release her now, with the marriage settlement we discussed, the £100 a year, the references. To release her so that her decision, if it is made without any pressure of money or scandal, whatever. Aunt, are you instructing me to release her? I am pointing out that the situation has materially altered, and that a man of honor would wish the woman to whom he had become attached to know, before the conversation that you have planned for Friday takes place, so that it takes place between two people who are entirely free." Cassian was silent for a long moment. "Marisol, my aunt is, as is generally her habit, entirely correct. If we take Crail tonight, by tomorrow morning, the codicil is no longer a noose. You may, by tomorrow afternoon, be in a hackney coach to anywhere in England you wish to be. I will pay for the coach. I will provide the references. I will sign the deed of annuity within the hour. I have already had it drawn up. It is in my pocket." He drew a folded paper from his coat. He held it out. She did not take it. "Sir, you are giving it to me now, because if I am to make the decision we were to make on Friday evening, you wish me to make it without the deed being held over me." "Yes. And so you have given me the deed before the decision, so that the decision, when it is made, is, your aunt's word, entirely free." "Yes. Sir, look at me, please." He had been holding the paper out. He lowered it. He looked at her. "Sir, I have observed in 3 days that when you are about to do something that costs you, you go very still in the shoulders. You are very still in the shoulders now. Sir, I do not require this paper to make the decision we were to make on Friday evening. I do not require it, because the decision was already made, by me, 2 evenings ago, in the carriage from Bloomsbury, when you held my hand at the carriage door for half a second longer than was necessary, and said 8 days, Miss Penrith. I know it now, watching you give me a piece of paper that if I take it, releases you from me, and you from me. And I see your hand is shaking. And I know that you also have made the decision, and that you are giving me this paper because you are afraid that I will not have made it too, and that I will use the paper, and that you cannot bear to ask me whether I have, in case I have not. Are you not, sir? He did not speak. Yes, he said after a moment, very quiet. I am. Then put the paper down, Cassian, on the table, where I can take it later if I need it, and where neither of us can pretend, in this hour, that it is not in the room. He put it down. And now, Cassian, look at me, and tell me the thing you were going to tell me on Friday evening. A long pause. Marisol. I had been a soldier 11 years before I came home. I had thought I had seen the limit of what I could be required to be afraid of. I was wrong. I have been afraid in this house, 3 days now. Of you. Not of what you might do. Of what I might do. I am afraid of loving things. I have a list, Marisol. The list is long. I do not wish to put your name on it. I have not, in any of these 3 days, known how to tell you that I no longer have a choice about the placing of your name on it, because the placing has already happened, against my better judgment. I am foreign. Marisol, in love with you. I have been in love with you since the moment in Talvert's office, when you said you were not certain your legs would carry you, and I saw that they were, in fact, carrying you. So, there it is. She was crying. Cassian, I should very much like, if you have no objection, to be married to you on Saturday. By special license, in your aunt's presence, in the morning, after Crail is taken, in the chapel of this house. I do not require flowers. I do not require a breakfast. I require only you, in a coat, at the front of a small room, and your aunt to witness, and the parish register signed. And afterwards, Cassian, I require to be taken, not to Renmere, not yet this house, to whatever rooms have been prepared for us, and not to be left in any separate establishment whatsoever. Do you hear me? Course. I am not Mrs. Halversham. I will not consent to be Mrs. Halversham. If you are going to marry me, Cassian Vexley, you are going to marry me. And after that, you are not going to Upper Canada, or you are taking me with you. Are we agreed? Yes. Then come here, please. He came, in the small library, with the deed of annuity still on the table. Cassian Vexley took Marisol Penrith into his arms for the first time, and held her, and put his face down into her hair, where the pearls lay against her neck, while she stood with her hands flat against the breast of his coat, and felt the steadying of his heart. Well, said Lady Iphigenia, without turning, I am extremely glad we have settled that. Cassian, kiss her once, properly, and then come and write to Littenford. Marisol, ring for fresh tea. We are going to have a wedding in this house, and I should like, if possible, not to disgrace the family in the matter of the cake. He kissed her once. Properly. It did not need to be long. Saturday morning, Marisol Penrith. The clock struck 12. It was done in 48 hours. Beckett came in at 8:20 on Thursday night, with an address in a court off Wapping High Street. By 9:45, 4 officers of the Home Office, 2 constables, Lord Liddenford himself in a plain dark coat, and Cassian Vexley were assembled in the back kitchen at Cavendish Square. By 11:15, in a brick courtyard in Wapping, Mordaunt Crail was apprehended. He did not resist. He gave up the letters from a leather wallet under his shirt, and was taken to a magistrate's house in Stepney before midnight. The letter dated 1812 was burned by Lord Liddenford himself in the grate at Cavendish Square at 1:15 on Friday morning, in the presence of Cassian, Lady Iphigenia, and Marisol, who had been brought down in her wrapper because she had asked very quietly to see it done. The young woman from Lambeth was sent home with 2 pounds and a basket of food. Mrs. Halversham was retrieved from Wells the same Friday afternoon and was returned to Bath unharmed and mortified. Lady Persephone Halloway, on Friday evening, received a private call from Lady Iphigenia, in which the older woman explained, over a single cup of tea, that there was to be a small private wedding at Cavendish Square on Saturday morning, that it would be announced in the Times on Monday, and that any version of events not consistent with the announcement would be considered an unkindness Lady Iphigenia would remember. Lady Persephone said, "I see, Aunt Iphigenia." She was, the following winter, married to a perfectly satisfactory viscount with an estate in Hampshire. The wedding took place at 10:30 on Saturday morning in the chapel of the Cavendish Square house, a small paneled room that had been swept, dusted, and filled with cut white roses by Mrs. Tyndall's staff in the space of one Friday afternoon. The clergyman was a cousin of Lady Iphigenia's, hastily summoned from Hampstead. The bride wore the dove-gray gown, not the concert dress. That one was for going out into the world, and this one was for coming home, with the pearls at her throat and a small spray of lily-of-the-valley pinned at her shoulder by Lady Iphigenia herself, with hands that were not quite steady. "My dear, I told you he had decided. I tell you now that you have decided very well." "Thank you, Aunt." "Aunt." "Yes, Aunt." The witnesses were Lady Iphigenia, Mr. Talbot, Mrs. Tyndall, and Beckett. Marisol stood beside Cassian Vexley and put her hand into his, and made the responses in a voice that was, to her own surprise, perfectly steady. He said, "I will." She said, "I will." He put a ring on her finger, a plain gold band, his mother's, and the clergyman pronounced them man and wife, and Cassian Vexley turned and lifted her chin with one finger and kissed her once, very lightly, and then again, very slightly less properly, in the presence of his aunt, who pretended not to notice. The register was signed. By 11, they were eating cake, and by 3, Lady Iphigenia had announced that she was going to her own rooms to lie down, and that her nephew and his wife might do whatever they pleased in the intervening hours, within the bounds of decency. Cassian, my dears, I am not, in fact, dead. They went upstairs. They went to the rooms that had been the green guest suite, and which had been transferred into the Duke's and Duchess's apartments. The fire had been built up, the curtains had been drawn, a small table held a decanter of Madeira, 2 glasses, and a single cut white rose. Marisol stood in the center of the room and looked around it as if she had never seen it before. "Cassian, 3 days ago I came into this room with 14 pounds in the funds, and a great-aunt in Penzance who does not write." "Yes." "And now?" "Now," he said. He had locked the door. He came across the carpet to her and stopped at her shoulder and looked at her in the cheval glass. "Now you are the Duchess of Brookshaven. You are the wife of a man who loves you so badly. His hands have not stopped shaking since Thursday morning, and we are going to spend the rest of the afternoon with the door locked while my aunt naps. We are going to, for the first time since Tuesday morning, simply be in a room together with no person in it requiring anything of either of us." "That sounds like the loveliest thing I have ever heard described." She turned in his arms and put her hands lightly on the front of his coat. "There is one thing. I had, these 3 days, I had in my mind, very strongly, the picture of Mrs. Halversham at 60 in the parlor with her embroidery. I would like, Cassian, very much, never to feel that I am her in the parlor. I would like, when we are 70, to be a person who, when you walk into a room, looks up. I would like to be a person whom, when I walk into a room, you look up. I would like us to begin, today, the small habit of looking up. Will you?" "Yes, Marisol, I will." "Good." She rose on her toes. She kissed him once, very softly, on the corner of the mouth, Then, Mr. Vexley. Yes, Mrs. Vexley. Pour the Madeira, please. He poured the Madeira. The first piece of news of consequence in the spring was that Mordaunt Crail had been transported for 14 years to Van Diemen's Land. The second was that the codicil's 8 days had been deemed, by the Court of Chancery, to have been satisfied in the meaning of the late Duke's intent. The third was that the Duke of Brookshaven had declined the commission in Upper Canada. In May, the Duke and Duchess of Brookshaven traveled together to Renmere. Lady Iphigenia came up for the summer. Mrs. Halversham, on receipt of a very long letter from her former pupil, came up in July and stayed 3 weeks, and went back to Bath in possession of a small annuity. The great-aunt in Penzance, on receipt of the announcement in the Times, finally wrote. Marisol answered the letter. She did not pursue the correspondence. There were limits, even now, to her capacity for charity in the matter of relations, who had not written for 13 years. In September, in the small library at Cavendish Square, Cassian Vexley laid a folded piece of paper on the table beside the decanter of Madeira. "What is this?" she said. "It is the deed of annuity. I have had it from Mr. Talvert's office. I am giving it to you again. Tear it up. Keep it. Burn it. It is no longer needed." She picked it up. She walked to the writing desk, opened the bottom drawer, and placed the deed inside. She closed the drawer. She locked it. She put the key on the chatelaine at her own waist. "There. I shall keep it, Cassian, in the drawer, for the rest of our lives. And every time I open the drawer, I shall see it. And I shall remember that on the morning we agreed to be married, you put it on a table in this room, before me, of your own free will, when you did not need to, because you were determined that I should be free to refuse you. And I shall remember that I did not refuse you. You did not. The most romantic thing that has ever been done to me in my life was that a man who loved me put on a table the means of my walking out, before he asked me whether I would walk in. Cassian. Yes, you are a very strange Duke. I am told by Aunt that I shall improve with age. I have no interest whatever in your improving. I should like you to remain exactly as you are. That is convenient, Marisol, because I am very unlikely to alter." She laughed. It was the first time she had heard herself laugh in this house. Not smile, not be amused. Laugh freely. It was the sound she would, in 20 years, look back on as the moment in which she had finally and completely understood that she was no longer afraid. He looked up at her, from his chair. She looked up at him. They had, both of them, looked up, on the small habit of looking up, for the 7 months they had so far been married, and they would continue to do so for 41 years thereafter, in 3 houses, through 2 long illnesses, through the births of 4 children, and the burial of 1, through Cassian's first speech in the House of Lords, and his last, through the death of Lady Iphigenia at 79, in her own bed at Cavendish Square, with both of them at her side. In the year that Marisol Vexley turned 63, she sat down at the same writing desk, and she opened the bottom drawer, and she took out the deed of annuity. The paper was a little brown at the edges. She read it through. She put it back. She locked the drawer. She thought, "Hadrian, old serpent, you did know what you were doing, and so did I, and so did he, and so, in the end, did all of us." Then she rose, and she went to find her husband, who was in the next room, reading. He looked up. She looked up. That was all. That had always been all. That had always been everything. "Thank you for being here, with me, with this story, for all the hours it has taken to tell. You are why these stories are written, because somewhere, at the other end of the page, there is a person who believes that ordinary courage is worth the telling, that quiet love is worth the watching, that a woman with 14 pounds in the funds, and a great-aunt who does not write, may yet stand in a chapel on a Saturday morning and choose, freely, the rest of her life. You make the writing possible. You are the reason these rooms are warm. If a moment of this story stayed with you, a sentence, a small turning, a hand laid on a wrist for the space of 8 bars of music, I should very much like to know which one. Tell me in the comments. The things that move you tell me what to write next, and I write only because you read. If you would like more stories of this kind, Regency rooms, slow courage, women who are not Mrs. Halversham, and men who learn not to be afraid of love, please do consider subscribing. It costs you nothing, and it tells me, very practically, that the next story is wanted. Thank you. Truly. Until the next one, be brave in the small ways, and look up when the person you love walks into the room.